السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Before I begin, I just want to mention, I want to thank a brother who sent me a suggestion to avoid touching my face while I'm doing this, especially in the time that we're going through. Of course, we all know that it's a habit that's very difficult to get away from. However, just to put your minds at ease, I just washed my hands. There you go, I'm doing it again. I just wash my hands with soap and water, so if I do anything, it's all fine. And if it's still a problem, maybe tomorrow I'll consider washing it with something more intense. But of course, I'm at home, I'm in my office, and if there's anything here, there's nothing I can do to prevent that. But of course, when I go outside and when you go outside, when you're touching stuff where there could be germs, especially coronavirus or something like that, then we make all efforts to either use gloves and then not touch those gloves, maybe go like this or something like that. So Jazakallah khair for that caring comment. Of course, feedback and comments like this, it tells me that people are listening and people care, because I know that a lot of us, we could say, you know what, who cares what he does? I don't want to say anything because I don't really care about it. So Jazakumullah khair, and keep bringing those comments, your suggestions. If you have questions, please do send me those questions. Now, today, inshallah, we want to do the part 2 of our series, Salah, the inner dimensions of Salah. And the topic of today's reminder is Salah and the relationship of Salah with our limbs, our hands, our face, our legs, our feet. What is the purpose of all of these things? And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created mankind and jinn except to worship. So when we do our salah, we're actually fulfilling the purpose of our body, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this way. And if you look in the comments of this video on YouTube, you will see an article, a link to an article which is called 5 Ways Yoga is Similar to Muslim Prayers. Now, this is, of course, written on, I think, a yoga website, and I just quickly looked it up. But my theory is that yoga, as you know, that yoga is from, it came from Hindus primarily, and then it basically invaded the Western culture and spread like wildfire. But until today, many of the poses in yoga are stuff which is they have some ritualistic things from the Hindu religion. However, if you look carefully, many of the things that are done in yoga are actually very similar to the salah that we do. In fact, one of the things that I heard, and if somebody finds an article on that, if you can share with me, I can share with everyone else, that one of the recommended moves in yoga, I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right, if it's called moves, but one of the postures in yoga is that you put your head down lower than the rest of your body for some time, so that the blood from your body will then rush to your brain, and it will actually it will help the health of the brain. It will help the health of the brain. And they say that in old age, a person who did this frequently during their life, when they reach old age, they are less likely to have diseases of the brain, like Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And this is something which is, I just looked it up. It is a solid thing that yoga does recommend, this move, this posture. And of course, we have it in our salah. Now, my theory is that, as we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we sent a messenger to every nation. So there is no doubt that messengers of Allah came to India, came to China, came to these regions which were, separate from the rest of the world until recently, and they were kind of living their own little pockets. I have no doubt, and even some of the scholars, they say that some of the people who the Hindus worship might actually be prophets of God in reality. but they have been distorted, just like the Christians have distorted who the real Isa alayhi salam is. Just the same way the Hindus might actually be worshipping people who were sent to them as prophets. And these are things which are remnants of the true teachings of them. So let us begin quickly, moving on. In our next part, which is the Salah in our limbs, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that there are 5 things that the heart needs to remain fresh, to remain connected, to not become dry. And these 5 things, he says, number 1 is Hubb for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 2 is knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because of course, if we truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to know who we love. So, knowledge. Number 3 is that if we love someone and if we know so much about them that they are so good, then of course our relationship would be very non-existent if we don't actually remember them or reach out to them. So these are the next 2 things, which are remembrance and reaching out. So dhikr and du'a. So number 1 is love. Number 2 is ilm of Allah. Number 2 is dhikr of Allah, remembrance of Allah. Number 4 is du'a, or the supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling out to Allah. And number 5 is Tawheed, which is that all of these 4 things that passed earlier, they must be done exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The level of love that we have for Allah cannot be there for anyone else. That's period. Not for our parents, not for our job, not for our money, not for our country, not for our children. If anyone or anything comes between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter how much we love that other person or thing, if it comes between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater, and that other thing must be cut out of that. So then Ibn al-Qayyim, he says that there are 3 types of people when it comes to the use of limbs. And subhanAllah, think about this, how we use our bodies. So he says that there are 3 types of people. Number 1 are people who use their limbs for the obedience of Allah. Number 2 are people who use their limbs for the disobedience of Allah. And number 3 are people who use their limbs for nothing productive, not in this dunya and not in the hereafter. And he says that this 3rd group might actually be worse. And of course, subhanAllah, when we look around, we see some people who are in category 1, which are people who use their limbs for the obedience of Allah, and we ask Allah to make us all from among them. But then you see a lot of the people who are either in the 2nd category or 3rd category, which is that either they are constantly using their body, their knowledge, their resources for disobedience of Allah, or they are completely heedless and they're wasting their lives away. They're not doing anything productive in this dunya. They're not running after dunya. They're not running after the hereafter. They are losers in both places. They are losers in both places. And he gave an example to make this point really clear in our minds and to impress upon us, easy to remember. He gave us the example of a man who has been granted a spacious land to farm and was supplied with all the instruments of need, tools, machines, seeds, water, to help him with his work. And the job that he has been given is that you have these 1,000 acres, and your job is to make this a beautiful land which grows food, beneficial food. So he says the first guy who uses his limbs for the obedience of Allah, who uses his body for the obedience of Allah, is like the person who takes all of what he has been given and he prepares the land. He plants various types of vegetation that are beneficial, that people eat on them. And then he takes measures to protect against theft by humans and damage by animals. And he keeps a close watch on this land. And he fixes anytime there's a problem, there are some plants which are rotting, he immediately goes and removes them, replaces them with a good plant. And he removes any harmful weeds. And then once there's a harvest and he basically makes a profit from this land, he doesn't just blow all of that away, but rather he uses at least some part of it to reinvest in that land, to upgrade it, to maintain it, in order to make the next year's harvest even better. So hopefully when it comes to our bodies, that's the category that we are in, which is how we use our bodies for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two is the second guy who uses what he has been given for disobedience of Allah. And he gave the example of the guy who makes it a place for opposite of what was intended. There are wild animals running there. There are rotten corpses being dumped there. It's a hideout for thieves. And he even gives all the stuff that he was given to those bad people and say, do whatever you want with it. Do whatever you want with it. And of course, these are our desires, right? We don't hand out our bodies, our ability to our desires and say, okay, desires, you run the show. Whatever you want to do, these limbs are going to follow. So this is what the second guy does, and I hope that, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are not from among them. And the third guy is completely neglectful, and he neglects this land completely and wasted the water that he was given in the desert, and he is a complete loser. He didn't even get, at least the second guy got maybe some credit from those bad guys, so at least they're not going to come and harm him. Although he's not doing any good. But of course, the third guy, he completely lost everything, not in this dunya and not in the hereafter. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is that, are we the first guy who we call the mindful person? Or the second guy who's a treacherous person, who did the opposite of what was supposed to be done? Or the third person who is the heedless guy? Which one are we when it comes to our body? And of course, Ibn al-Qayyim says all of this is to say that the Salah is the proper use of our body in terms of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the first thing that needs to be done with our body, which is to make obedience to Allah in the form of Salah, by putting our most honorable part of our body, our face, down on the floor. In humility, use our hands, use our feet, bow down, prostrate, use our tongue to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of these, this is the proper use of that land or that body that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grant us to benefit from this reminder. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala especially that our young people can understand what is being said here. That our bodies are not for us to do. In much of the world there is a movement, and recently this movement had this big talk going on and big rallies and stuff, and they said, my body, my business. They said, it's my body, don't tell me if I should do this or if I should not do this. I'm going to do if I want to sleep around, if I want to get tattoos, if I want to do drugs, if I want to do alcohol, if I want to do whatever. You should not be telling me what to do with my body. And of course, as Muslims, we say that no, our body has been loaned to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's an amana. And we must return this body to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without having misused it. And if we do misuse it, not only we will be held accountable, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring against us witnesses that will testify to Allah how we misused our body. And in fact, what will those witnesses be? Our body parts themselves. Our skin will speak. Our tongue, our eyes will speak. When we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this person used me for such and such sin. And subhanallah, the opposite is true as well, which is that when we use our body to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then our bodies will testify for us and say, Ya Allah, this man kept me, meaning the legs, up all night, making me so tired while he was worshipping you. Oh Allah, forgive him on this day. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us from this reminder. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. I just want to make a quick note. If you have a YouTube account and you find benefit in these videos, please consider subscribing. What subscribing does is that if I have a significant number of subscribers, more tools become available for me to be able to do more creative things with these videos. So if I have a large number, then it allows me to do that. So inshallah, if you have a YouTube account and you don't find that if you find benefit in these videos, please, jazakumullah khair, if you can if you can subscribe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.